Good evening. This is Mnemo Connect, one of the 5 live series on Consecutivo's Mnemo channel. On Mnemo Connect, we discuss conscienciologic subjects, especially those most related to seriexology through debates and interviews with our guests from the international cosmoethical conscienciological community. In this edition, we will discuss cosmoethic codes and seriexology. And tonight we'll have 2 guests. Both are researchers in parallology. We'll introduce them after the opening. Stay there. Well, the first guest is Cristina Arakaki. She's a researcher of paralaw and cosmoethics, volunteer and teacher in conscienciology since the 90s, Penta practitioner since 2001, with an academic background in the areas of law and international relations. Born in Rio de Janeiro and currently living in Foz do Iguaçu since 2002. She's a volunteer at Juriscons, International Association of Paralaw. Hi, Cristina. How are you?
Hi, João. How are you? I'd like to thank you and Consecutivo's team for this invitation. I'm very glad to be here with you and our other guest, Vanderlei, that we're going to introduce right away. But I'm very happy to be here and like to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, and you are very welcome. And our next guest is Vanderlei Teresinha Kubiak. She's a researcher of paralaw and cosmoethics. She has been a volunteer and teacher in conscienciology since 1994 and a Penta practitioner since 2005. She has an academic background in the areas of law and conflict mediation. She lives in Porto Alegre, Brazil, and also volunteers at Juriscons. Hi, Teresinha.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here too with friends, Cristina, Arakaki, and João Paulo, all the team of Consecutives. I'm so happy to be here.
Glad to have you here too. And before the first question, I like to ask you to hit the like icon down below and subscribe to Consecutivo's channel if you can. Please feel free to write on the chat and leave comments and questions as you wish during all the live. All right. So to begin questions and discussion, the first question is from the beginning. From what evolutionary moment does consciousness develop effectively applied a cosmoethical code? When this began, when a conscious or a person start to elaborate and using their codes?
Well, João, first of all, I'd like to, I don't know if everybody who is listening us is familiar with this expression, cosmoethical codes. So I would like to make a very brief explanation about that, if you think it's a good idea. Yes, so we can be at the same page. Is that right?
Right, no problem at all.
Yes, well, cosmoethical codes come from cosmoethics, of course. And cosmoethics, as we know, is one of the milestones, one of the cornerstones of the consciential paradigm. It's our moral philosophical principles or hollow philosophical principles because it considers the conduct or the moral norms far beyond the human codes or the human moral. between our human beings here, because it consider the moral conduct considering, for instance, multiple lives, multiple dimensions, and all other principles that are related to the consensual paradigm. Okay, well, saying that, we know that it's very important for us to develop our code of conduct based on cosmoethics. Okay, so that's what called codes of cosmoethics. All the set of principles or all the set of norms that one can elaborate and also follow, of course, in order to be more holomature, in order to be more aware of the evolutionary path, in order to enhance evolutive intelligence. Okay, so these codes of cosmoethics, they are very personal in the beginning, or in a very lato sensus way, we can say that. Okay, it's personal, and since the consciousness will discover these dynamics of evolution, and mainly when the consciousness acquires more lucidity about this evolutionary path and the evolutionary choices that the consciousness himself or herself can make. So the consciousness start to think more about the effects of his actions or his actions to the cosmos. Okay, so that's the moment that the consciousness could reflect more about how within his or her own choices, and up, upon reflection um, on his or actions, the consciousness could be more intersistential. For example, the consciousness could achieve more lucidity, more evolutionary lucidity. The consciousness could, for instance, do more intra-consensual recycling, okay, and to enhance his or her actions according to cosmoethics. In that point, it's a good point for the consciousness to start to think about developing and put into action a personal code of cosmoethics. That's one of the main codes of cosmoethics that conscientiology and cosmoethics and parallel study.
Good, very nice. And Vanderlei,
Yeah,
you want
yes.
to add something?
In addition, I think the consciousness start to develop effective applied cosmoethical codes when in the very moment in which it reaches a minimum level of holomaturity and lucid self-discernment. In this time, in this process, when the consciousness starts to do a self-diagnosis and rethinks in order to eradicate your own self-corruption. Marks the beginning of the resistance to act the anti-cosmoetic way. For me, is the moment and the consciousness acquires a self-awaken about his process of evolution. And make efforts to eradicate your own self-corruptions.
It's also, João, when a consciousness has this kind of lucidity and experiences that enables she or he to know that he or she has some kind of moral autonomy that upon reflection and upon establishing some kind of self-rules, the conscience could be the best version of his or herself, you know, in order to express his or her strong traits, in order to overcome the weak traits, in order to acquire the lack traits, you know. So it's very important for us, mainly the intermissivists, those who consciously admit that has doing like intermissive course. It's very important for us as intermissivists to reinforce this moral autonomy, because entering a little bit in seriology, for instance, sometimes in our past lives, maybe our moral conduct could be directed by like religious code, by warlike codes, by only philosophical codes, because the codes of cosmoethics, one of the most important things besides this moral autonomy and this process of overcoming our self-corruption, as Vanderlei said very well said, is to put into practice the ideas that the cosmoethical ideas or the cosmoethical theories that we already admit for us. Because otherwise, we're going to be only in this in theory. You know, our words will be okay, but our actions will not comply with our ideas. So one of the main characteristics of the codes of cosmoethics, of the personal code of cosmoethics, is to modify, to alter our conduct, our behavior. And in terms of consensual paradigm, this conduct and this behavior embraces thoughts, sentiments, and actions, okay? So it's not a physical action, but the way that we think, the way we structure our way of thinking, yes, the way we feel or we deal with our emotions, and of course, how these dynamics of thoughts and sentiments and emotions could be a result of our actions, our physical actions as well.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
this is
And from the
very
point of view,
important.
I'm sorry.
That this Chris said, it's very important because the personal code of Cosmoet allow us practical experience of cosmoethics. Cosmoethics ceases to be just a theory and begins to be an experience through altruistic decisions, sincerity, loyalty for yourself, and the elimination of self-corruptions. I think is an important point, practical experience. That is the importance of personal code of cosmoethics.
Okay. And from this view that we can elaborate a code, a personal code. From this point of view, what do you think? Our code, that the one we consciously elaborate, is something that it's our real level of cosmoethics, and we want to be to fix that, to consolidate that in our posturing, in our anything, in anything we do, or is something we are actually aiming ahead. You know what I mean? Something we want to achieve in a future. how we should think when we elaborate this code.
Well, as Vanderlei said, first of all, we have to do like a very something that you know very well, João. Some activity that you know very well. That's a self-consciometric. Okay, you have to do a self-evaluation, considering all your conduct, all your traits. Okay. And then, of course, doing this, the person is going to know what already this person has consolidated as a strong trait or a mature trait. This also could be used in order to put into practice the personal code of cosmoethics. Okay. But the main important things is the consciousness to achieve more lucidity about the self-corruption conduct. That means that the lack of authenticity or the lack of honesty that the person has with his or herself. Okay. So this is crucial. This is one very important thing when we elaborate our personal code of cosmoethics. And of course, it has to also to do with the chronemic of this introphysical life, and also with the hints or the way of the existential program. So you have to put all these elements all together and try to establish very practical actions in order to, as I said before, to overcome your immaturity traits or your self-corruption conduct, okay, or your anti-cosmoethical conduct. I'm going to do an example. For instance, someone who is always late has this kind of difficulty to be punctual or to have some kind of, to be on time, okay, to be on time. So this is a leg trait of punctuality, or like, so it's a very simple clause, a very simple principle that a person could write, because the personal code of cosmoethics is something that's written, should be written, okay, and should be on paper like this. Okay, it's not good to have this in our file in your notebook or your laptop or on your phone. Okay,
it must be touchable, right?
Yeah, it's got to be touchable, and it has to be achievable all time. Okay, you have to have this on your hands. Okay, so the person's going to write it down. I'm going to come 5 minutes ahead, all kind of appointments that I have, for instance. See, this is very practical. It's not something very elaborate. So answering your question, is the personal code of cosmoethics, it's something that you could use your already strong traits in order to help yourself to overcome your weak traits and your lack traits.
Yes. So you have to understand them very well. That's why you talk about consciometrics, right? So we must know our weak traits, that things that we can do something about it, and also our strong traits that can overtake them. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's it. That's it. In short, that's it.
yeah, very short, very short.
Yeah, because there is some kind of subtleness in self-corruption. So, and it is a kind of dynamics, right, João? Because you are especially seen in consciometrical approach. So there is some kind of subtleness of self-corruption. So the more sophisticated the one's personal code of cosmoethics is, the more the less subtleness in self-corruption the consciousness will have. You understand that? It's
Yeah, sure.
yes.
Yeah, it's very clear. And
It's a
when
very
we
personal personal code of cosmoethics, as the name says. It's very personal because it's based on the consciential singularity. The conscientiousness makes your her or his own reflections based on personal facts and para-facts. He write down his clauses. It's a self-prescription, a self-legislation in order to get a self-improvement. That's the way.
yeah, and to be practical, as you said,
Yeah.
it must be in a piece of paper and carry with us all the time, right? But how these um, fundamentals of our conduct and our way to live can be intrinsic in our paragenetics. It means if when I die, in the next life, I will not have the same piece of paper. But how can this become my way of conduct things? How can this be real without I have to take a paper with me?
Well, first of all, it's important for us to have a paper because sometimes because if some kind of conduct, it's like a habit, okay? When you have a bad habit, when you have a conduct that someone wants to change, it's good for us to have some kind of written rules or written orientation in front of us, or something that we can be on our hands very easily, in order to remember us how to act differently. Otherwise, it will be very difficult because we already have this kind of habit. Okay, so the personal code of cosmoethics, uh, one of the main aims is really this: to change our bad habits, our bad behaviors. So was, for instance, this example that I said about beyond time. So once the consciousness acquired this new habit, or sometimes this new way of thinking, okay, there is no more use to have this clause or this written norm in the code. So that's why the personal code of cosmoethics has to be evaluated, has to be revised by time to time. It's not something rigid, fixed. Sometimes some kind of self rules could stay at the personal code of cosmoethics for a long time. Yes. The more difficult it is to change a certain kind of habit or certain kind of conduct, the longer this self legislation, this self law, will going to remain in one's personal code of cosmoethics. But once this habit or this bad habit, this anti-cosmoethical conduct, or this self-corruption way of thinking is overcome, okay, so we that means that the consciousness, the person has already embedded this new habit, has already acquired this new habit, this more cosmoethical habit, okay. So there's no more necessity to have this specific clause or principle in one's personal code of cosmoethics. So it's time to put another one, or to revise, or to enhance them in order to go to the deepest kind of self-corruption that one could have. I don't know if it's clear. Is that what you asked for?
Yeah,
Wrong. Okay.
crystal clear.
Okay.
Vanderlei wants to add something?
Your question, if I understood, it's about how can consciousness fix its cosmoethical codes in self-paragenetics. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes, as Chris said, it depends of the goals of the consciousness. If how much effort the consciousness does to implement his changes, the changes that was written in the code. I think it's when it's theory in practice. The daily basis, always trying to do the best to check the clothes. I have my code here. I don't know if it's a synthesis of my code, very small sentence in order to fix in my memory, my mind. And when occurs something that I remember my clothes, it's here. It's for me, it's a simple way to remember in simple sentences, short sentence.
And we have to update these eventually, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, always.
Always.
Yeah, yeah. And we have some people here saying good night. Vilma Almeida, Luciano Lavor says very good subject, and Daiane Rosa. And Daiane has a question. She asked, why personal code of cosmetics can help alleviate conscious self-blame, and what its effects are on holobiography.
Thanks, everybody, for participating. Thanks, Diana, for your question as well. Well, one of the main results or effects of the personal code of cosmoethics is to, as I said before, to consolidate the moral autonomy of the consciousness. So the moral autonomy has to do with this power of one's self to decide about their own actions, despite, for instance, third opinion, or despite mesology, for instance, or other hetero moral codes. So the personal code of cosmoethics, Diane, could help to alleviate self-blame by self-empower the person to do the changes, because self-blame is something that, like, put the person in a very no way out, you know, situation, and also in a very in a very stuck way, because with self-blame sometimes the person will acquire or require others forgiveness in order to move on. So this self-blame could be, as very paradoxically speaking, could be overcome by self-unforgiveness. That's one subject that Vanderlei studies very well. So the self-unforgiveness is the power that a person has in order to recognize that there are a lot of things to be changed, or the person did some kind of made some kind of errors, because we are going to make mistakes in our life, in our evolution, of course. But the self-forgiveness attitude empower us to make the necessary changes, to do not repeat the same error or the same mistake, for instance, and also to decide for a new way of acting. Okay, so this will have some, I think that we have a very good effect on the holobiography, because the consciousness will have we will learn the way to desdramatize his or her own mistakes, okay, but also to take the evolution very seriously, and also to use his or her own powers, like will, like self-organization, like intention. This is very important when we talk about cosmoethics, and when we talk about personal code of cosmoethics, and when you talk about self and forgiveness. The intention to do different, and the intention to do better than we did before. So this will could be a milestone, a very important milestone in the whole biography of the consciousness, because it could just change this attitude, or this way of thinking, sometimes religious way of thinking, of self-blaming, and okay, so I have to suffer, or then there is no way out, I'm this way, I'm going to be this way as always, like Gabriella syndrome, okay. And the conscience could be like that. Okay, I did this mistake, but now I could change this. It's okay, I have will, I have a good intentions. The consciousness has to have a good intention, yeah. And I could do better than I did before. I don't know if Vanderlei want to talk a little bit about self and forgiveness.
Yes, I think the personal code of cosmoethics is the theory and practice of the self and forgiveness. As Chris said, the cosmoethical self forgiveness is. I wrote an entry in the encyclopedia. Is the most intelligent evolutionary stance for consciousness who assume full responsibility for its own errors, faults and deficiencies and omissions. And the personal code is the way to change when you establish new actions, new behaviors. It's a kind of it promotes recycling in order to correct our mistakes and repair self-deficiencies. So it's a self-correction, self-recycling, self-repair, self-legislation, self-accountability, self-improvement. There are connection with self and forgiveness and personal code of conscience. Sorry, personal code of cosmoethics.
All right, that was very good. And how going to the seriexology and cosmetical codes, how the study of seriexology can help us to be more accurate in the elaboration of a cosmetical code. When we look further back and maybe remember a past life, how can these help us to improve our codes?
Well, João, first of all, we have to take into account or that maybe for most of us it's the first time that we are having this broad idea about cosmoethics. So we may say that in our past lives, uh, um, although we could have like a very high standard of moral conduct according to the moral codes of that time, specific time of that specific culture, and although one could have some kind of transcendent reality that considers what we call now multidimensionality, and although one could have some kind of I don't know, idea about past lives. But what I'm going to say now is having consideration that for most of us, it's the first time that we all have, in theory, by hypothesis, in our intermissive course, the idea of all these elements all together without any kind of religion approach or mystical approach, and mainly regarding the evolutive intelligence. Okay, so this is the premise. So taking this into account, I'm saying that considering that the first time that we have the opportunity to have more information in this intraphysical life, in this human body with our physical brain about cosmoethics, and we have the opportunity to have a lot of more information and to remember the information that we could have had in our intermissive course. All of this is new, okay? Because, as I said before, cosmoethics is far beyond the human moral codes. So, by studying past lives, we could, for instance, revealing for us the necessity of have new moral codes, okay? Because it's very understandable that in past lives we are like attached, or we are like we have like consciously or unconsciously, yeah, attached to some kind of moral codes that do not have this broadened idea of evolution. So this is one point. I'm going to give you an example. For instance, a person who has this hypothesis have to has lived in Japan for the last lives and has some kind of affinity to the samurais called the Bushido. That's called Bushido in Japanese. So this code, this moral code, has a lot of good principles like loyalty, like discipline, and so on. But it was like all these principles were applied to a certain kind of conduct, yeah, that now with the idea of cosmoethics and with the idea of evolutive intelligence, it's very anachronic, it's anachronistic moral code, okay? And although this person is no more in Japan and there is no more Bushido and there are no more samurais, it's like in the self genetic, the para self genetic, it's very intrinsic in the way that this person could think or could act. Okay. So now when this person is going to write, elaborate the personal code of cosmoethics, it's very useful if this person pay more attention about what kind of principles and values, and more important than that, what kind of actions this person is going to do in order to renew the behavior, even though they're the same values. For instance, loyalty. Okay, samurais sometimes they're loyal to their, I don't know, their chief, the emperor. Okay, and this have like a kind of blind loyalty. Yeah, but now we have to be loyal to our para provenance. We have to be loyal to our intermissive principles. We have to be loyal to our I don't know, to sometimes now to the extra physical helpers, to the multidimensional mechanisms. You see, it's the same value. However, it's now an update. So when you study past lives, for instance, someone who are very close to the positivism, for instance, yes? So what kind of moral code, what kind of moral, yes, what kind of ethics were embedded in this positivist theory or philosophy? No one who knows that has this hypothesis of being in the monarchy or in a religion order. Yes. So this is why when we do our personal code of cosmoethics, have this kind of idea, or the more hollow memory, or the more hypothesis a person has about his or her past lives. Yes, and the more this person has already studied the moral holocene of that time, or that group, yes, of that this person was in the past lives, the better it would be to refine, to refine the clauses of the personal code of cosmoethics.
Good. Vanderlei?
Yes, the study of seriexology, it's very important, especially to identificate our review our past lives. We can identify repetitive behaviors in historical self-corruptions. It makes it possible to discover the discrepancies between old values and our new values that we brought from the intermissive course. It include, for example, think about behaviors that are still influenced by religions, by warlike or other dogmatisms codes. It's very important study. It's help us make self-diagnosis about what we really need to change in this life.
Right.
So, yeah, just summarize that, João, because this question is very important. So, seriology, the study of seriexology, will act like could function as a filter for this overcome the anachronistic codes of the moral codes. You see? So this study is very important for us in order to elaborate a more efficiency code, a personal code of cosmoethics.
Right. And Liliana Alexandre says, good evening. And she asks, I don't know if it's something that one of you said, but she says, how is self unforgiveness not a consequence of self blame? I don't catch exactly what she's asking. Is something that you said?
Yeah, because we are talking about self unforgiveness and self blame when you talk about the something related to past life. Maybe I can't remember right now. But thanks, Liliana, for your presence here and for your question. I think that self blame has to do with a very intrusion way of thinking, because self blame sometimes do not give us a space to do in a different way. As I said before, self blame stucks us in a kind of behavior, and our way of thinking maybe it's very difficult to change. Whereas self unforgiveness is like demands this kind of recognition, and take into account our mistakes, the self accountability of our own mistakes. As okay, self blame said, okay, I did this wrong, or I'm not so good in this one. But self unforgiveness is a kind of self empowerment, because it gives us the opportunity and it shows us how to do in a different way. Okay, and recycling this kind of trade or habits. I don't know if that's what you wanna you ask, Liliana, but I see that self blame could be the first approach, maybe in a more religion or in a more as I said, yeah, religion way. Okay, and self unforgiveness, it's something that's upon self blame, something that I can I do not say that's a consequence of self blame, because self unforgiveness already encompasses this kind of recognition of our mistake. But it also show us and empower us to do different, because it's count only our own will, our own intention, no matter what other people think or said. Okay, and I don't know if I don't know if Vanderlei want to elaborate more on this, because she's a kind of specialist
I'm a
in
specialist, but not in English.
self unforgiveness.
Self and forgiveness, but it's a kindness way of ourselves, not something that you have to, as you asked, self blame. Uh, it's not a self blame. It's a look of kindness with ourselves in order to recycle that weak traits, or that it doesn't fit anymore for our level, evolutionary level, and our goals. It's you have to look at yourself, to see yourself in a kind way. It's based on self-research and meta-tocenity. Think about how how our docents, and self-acceptance in the first way, because you just can change a weak trait when you accept that you have that trait, and then recycle, but not with a rigid look beyond ourselves. I don't know if I explain properly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
there's
think I
no
think it's
punishment involved. Okay,
Yes, no punishment.
There is no self-punishment involved.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And so the self-unforgiveness is something that free us from the self-blame. We can say that. The self-unforgiveness free us from the self-blame.
Yes, in Portuguese, I made name. In Portuguese means love, but in English you cannot use because in Portuguese, amar, it's a acronym. I don't know how to say in English acronym. It's acronym.
Yes.
Yes. So in English would be SMSS because self-research, meta-tocenity, self-acceptance, and self-recycling. That's the synthesis of the self-unforgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that sometimes people really have this kind of confusion about self-blame and self-unforgiveness, because self-unforgiveness, it's a very challenging concept. Yes, because in our modern society there is this we have to forgive yourself and so on, but to forgive ourselves, that means that sometimes this does not mean that you have the power to change yourself for yourself. Okay, so and sometimes when you forgive yourself, you just stay at the same point. Okay, I did this. Okay, I'm going to forgive myself. But with the self unforgiveness, no. This again, this empowers you to make different. This is, I think, that's the great one of the main difference between self-blame and self-unforgiveness. Okay, because when you self-forgive you, or when you forgive you, you have the self-forgive, not unforgiveness, but forgiven. You like have no sometimes alternative, and you do not have this kind of motivation to do in a different way. That's why it's different concepts, and that's why self-unforgiveness it's very challenging, because it does not have any kind of punishment, any kind of imprisonment. It's quite the contrary. It frees us from our self-blame, and it empowers us in order to do in a different manner, using our will, our intention, our lucidity, our discernment. See, all these consciential attributes that are so important for our evolution.
Yeah, very well. And another uh, question is about our temperament. How our temperament can be adjusted with our codes, or can be helped to be adjusted or changed or recycled, and how can we elaborate one thing according to the other, temperament and our personal codes.
Well, depends on the temperament of a person. It could be easier or more difficult to implement new habits. Do you agree, João? Because you are the specialist in temperament.
Yeah, we have to, I think we have to be the most realistic as we can, like you said in the beginning. So we have to understand how we work to be more realistic when we elaborate something that we can actually put it in action. Our list of new habits and new things, and adjust uh, a few things, but we, I think our temperament is paragenetic. We bring this for a long, long time, and it changed not so fast. But I think we have to be very careful for not doing something too much further than we can actually do. So this kind of thing can frustrate us, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, that's why when we talk about personal code of cosmoethics, John, we mention like a binomial that is feasible. The personal code of cosmoethics has to be at the same time challenging and feasible. Okay, so this has to be a balance between these two concepts or these two you know, because it has to be feasible in the first hand, of course, but it has to be challenging as well, because the idea is just for us to make an effort, and sometimes we have to do a great effort to change things, you see? So the more realistic we are, of course, about our self-reality, our traits, our temperament, as you ask, uh, the better. But we have to like elevate. You have to have some challenges. Like we are here, so we have to have some challenge upon our way of doing things as usual. You see, that's why when you write down your clothes or your principles or personal code of cosmoethics, they have to be feasible. Okay, but at the same time challenging and demands some kind of effort in order to be put into practices. So depending on the temperament of a person, uh, sometimes it could be like easier to implement this the code of cosmoethics, the personal code of cosmoethics, and sometimes it's be more difficult because sometimes, for instance, someone that's very stubborn, yeah, I don't know if it's stubborn, yes, and or a person who is not like has a very how can you give some kind of examples of temperament here, João? Then we can elaborate on your examples.
All right. Well, we can talk about traits of temperament, not the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing because it's too complex. But someone is has fear or something, fear to talk, to speak out in public, for example.
Okay. Okay, so the people who has this kind of difficult to speak in public. Okay, so knowing that the person could elaborate a clause in his or her personal code of cosmoethics, establishing that he's going to gradually, okay, speak up more in public, because we cannot have this idea of like being in a completely be a completely lazy people and then person then start to run a marathon the day after. Okay, you have to do in a little steps, but having in mind the main goal, the main objective of this change of habit or this change of trait in the temperament, and then plan, okay, or elaborate clauses that could uh, could have the possibility of the person to make progress little by little. Okay, another thing, for instance, sometimes the personal code of cosmoethics could do like a kind of domestication of temperament. I don't know if you, João, use this kind of expression, domestication, or to help to have a more, I don't know, kind
Control.
temperament, control of your temperament. Okay. And also depend on the way that a person could do our self-research about this self-corruption, self-uncorruption state. This will help also to uncover more aspects of the one's temperament. I don't know if you agree with me, João. Yes, do you think
No,
so
it's all
that
right. It's very clear,
self-corruption?
and I agree. I agree with you.
Mhm. Yeah, do you agree with me
Sorry.
that sometimes when we study more the subtleness of our self-corruption, we can uncover some aspects of our temperament that wouldn't be possible to do in another way?
Sure. True. Very true.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can do things, bad things, and we don't even notice. We
Yes.
have bad things, bad thoughts, and we don't even it's passed by. So
Yes.
we have to be very careful with this corruption, subtle corruption. Yes, that's
Yes.
true.
That's it. Uh-huh.
Yes. On the other hand, more peaceful interassistantial and lucid temperaments favor codes focused in or more assistance, cosmoethical leadership. So I think I agree with Chris said that sometimes the temperament can influence in difficult way or in easy way.
Yeah.
Because the personal code of cosmoethics, John, has to do with enhance our polykarmic self-behavior. That means that all of our conduct, our behavior, should be focusing on the polykarmic effects. Okay, so I think that this could help us to be more self-centered, yes, and be more polykarmic. And I think that this has to be with temperament, yes?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's also true. And sometimes when we travel overseas and we have to adjust our behavior for new culture, new values, new laws, and everything's new. And this happens in the same way with our cosmetical codes.
Uh, I don't know if I understand very well. For instance,
Yeah, if yeah,
I have my personal code of cosmoethics, and then I'm going to travel to
yes,
another.
the cosmoethical is universal and,
Yes,
and point. And when we travel to another places, we have different cultures and things that it's not universal.
mhm,
It's a piece of land that think and act and have different values away from ours. But our cosmetical codes must be universal, right? But when we travel, we have to interact with different people and different cultures. We have to adjust our code, for example, for that uh, scenario.
yeah. I don't know if we have to adjust our personal code of cosmoethics. I think that sometimes it's important to have to do some kind of concessions. It depends on the case. I think this is a trick question because it depends on the case. Okay. So, for instance, if I travel to Korea, South Korea, or to certain place of China, I'm not going to eat dogs because there they it's cultural. Okay, they eat dog meat. I do not eat any kind of meat at all, but anyway, I'm not going to eat dog meat, for instance. Okay. But on the other hand, if I'm going to travel to a Muslim country and all women has to use this kind of, I don't know, veil, something like that in respect of its cultural, thus we're not going to break any of my cosmoethic principles, you know. On the contrary, I'm going to do some kind of concession, despite the fact that I'm not fond of Muslim or any kind of religion principles. But as a diplomatic action, conduct, I could use this kind of veil. I don't know if it's this. This is what you asked for. Did you your 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 question is about this, João?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Different
Uh-huh.
cultures, different habits, things that
Yeah.
we don't do sometimes,
Yeah.
and we are not used to, but we have to face it, and we have a code that must be followed, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, the personal code it goes beyond a local culture because it's related to consciential values.
Yes.
So it's independent of the place where the consciousness is in that moment,
Yeah.
because it's consciential values, consciential principles, and they are universal.
Yeah. You know, there are two basic principles of cosmoethics that's been very important, and it's it should be, yeah, this big principle, this broad principle should be like in our personal code of cosmoethics. It should be like embedded in this our personal code of cosmoethics. The two main principles of cosmoethics: may what happens be the best for everyone. That's the omni extension of well-being. Okay. And what is not good, in fact, serves no useful purpose, the destructive cosmoethics. You see, but beyond that, there are some kind of sometimes some concessions that it's important to make, depending on the case. You see, so the great challenge of being cosmoethics in this dimension within this physical body, okay, when you have to pay bills, when you have like headaches and belly pain, you know, and we have to interact with other different kind of intraphysical consciousness and extraphysical consciousness as well, that are so different in terms of morals, of approach, and so on, is to put these two principles all together in all kind of actions that we are going to do. And that's why I think, John, that cosmoethics is very challenging for all of us. And that's why it's so important for all of us to have a certain kind of code of cosmoethics. Uh, I'd like to give an example. I don't know if it's going to, you see this?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is this name Book of Virtues. It was written. It has been written. Benjamin Franklin Code of Conduct. You see, and it's Benjamin Franklin, the very well known politician and scientist and diplomat. You know, the American uh, politician. So he wrote this in the 18th century, I guess. Yes, and it has like we could say 13 items. You see, at that time, it's just an example. You see, at that time, someone has written down, has already wrote down some kind of de- determining like rules. I'm just going to read one of here. let's say here, temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Some kind related to food and drink. Yeah. Frugality. Make no expense, but to do good to others or yourself. Waste nothing. You see, this from old times, people already have some kind of ideas how to improve their own behavior. But here, for instance, he talks about God. He said, imitate Jesus and Socrates. Okay, Socrates, okay, but imitate Jesus. So it has some kind of religion approach as well. But cosmoethics uh, leads us to think about the effects of our action on the cosmos, and not only in this life but for the future lives, okay, considering our past lives. This Benjamin Franklin did not think about. I don't know if he thought about this, but as far as I know, there is no kind of indication of multidimensionality or past life years. Another example, George Washington also writes something about rules of civility and decent behavior in company and conversation. This is a kind of code of conduct of George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. Okay, and there are like here 110 rules or personal like norms or personal uh, like statements that he aimed to follow. You see, so a lot of other people, all of other lines of philosophy talks about these moral codes. Confucius, like Zaza, né? In the Caminho do Meio. I don't know how to say that in English. Sorry, you know, like Seneca, and a lot of other philosophers talk about this moral code or these principles of behavior, yeah? Because we could say that he got in past lives or uh, past eras, but now cosmoethics give us a new approach on all of this, with more challenging because it has to do with self-corruption, but also to be more aware about the effects of our conduct on the cosmos, on other consciousness, and how we can like leave a very good photonic signature during our evolutionary path.
Okay. Vanderlei wants to say something on that?
No, very interesting. That books Chris showed us. Very
All
interesting.
right. And another thing now, uh, in every life, we have different conditions, maybe ups and downs, and so on. And this we call the broken line of seriexology. And is this broken line influence in our cosmoethical level, or no matter the way we live, the life we have, we deep inside know our real cosmoethical level to know how to elaborate our codes?
Well, it depends on the lucidity and hollow maturity level of the consciousness, right, João? Because sometimes, even though uh, the consciousness is living what we call a broken line, this series of existence, and this broken line could be like um, for more or for less, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So as the self-awareness of our or the self-lucidity of cosmoethics depends on the level of the evolutionary level of consciousness. I think that in that case, the broken line, for instance, for more, could be an opportunity for the consciousness to maybe fix or consolidate some kind of cosmoethics habits. Okay. On the other hand, this broken line for less, depending on the level of maturity and lucidity of the consciousness for that specific life, could be not like a regression, but could reinforce some bad habits or some anti-cosmoethic habits. But on the bottom line, it has to do with the results of the evolutionary record, the personal evolutionary record. Because I don't know if you agree with me, because the summing up of all these actions and the behaviors and the results of one actions, that counts on the end. So depending on the level of lucidity of the consciousness about this specific broke line, but if this broke line is for less, there are great chance or big chance to reinforce some kind of anachronic behaviors, anachronic values, okay? And if this broken line is for more, sometimes it's a good opportunity for the consciousness to starting to not consolidate, but starting to have experiences that give this consciousness the opportunity to act in a different way. And this could be like the beginning of a restructuring of his or her kind of sanity. And maybe depending on the results of this life, the final results of these specific lives, this could be carried on to the next one as in the hollow memory, as a good as a good experience. And depending on the level of the lucidity of the person, the life ahead, this could be easily recovered, and then could be maybe like put into practice already, but could be like a hint for a new and a more cosmoethical way of conduct. And then this could be written in a new code of cosmoethics.
I completely agree with Chris. Since the broken line represents phases of instability of the consciousness, can be regressive or can be for more more strong. How can I say? Can promote more, accelerate the evolution. Can if for regressive, difficult the consolidation of the strong traits, and also difficult to establish a new sense of cosmoethics. But if it's something for a more evolutive way, can promote a consciousness, a great opportunity to do many recyclings, I think.
All right.
But I'm not a specialist in seriexology, so it's my opinion.
But you're doing good. You say nice. And for a last question for beginners. It's a last question, but for beginners. Um, um, if someone wants to elaborate your list of cosmoethical conduct to be useful and practical and realistic, how many items it should be at the most?
In the beginning, 10 at the most. In the beginning, to start
Yeah,
with,
10 at the most.
maximum 10. Okay? But I've seen some examples of person that has like a two clauses, but these clauses were the priority in the personal evolutive moment. Okay, the evolutive moment of this person.
That's
So
surgical, right?
this, yes, surgical, yes, right. Because here we're not talking about quantity, but we are talking about quality. So that's why we reinforce this suggestion. Okay, the less clauses to be more effective, to be more feasible, but also to be more challenging. Yes, and to begin with, to start with, it's a very good idea to have at maximum 10 items.
Okay. And
But
we are,
it's not rigid. It's very important for everybody here to have their own experiences. Do not believe in anything that we are saying here. Okay? Have your own experiences. And there are a lot of opportunities for those who want to learn more or study more about and elaborate her personal code of Cosmoethics. There are courses, there are entries of the encyclopedia. There are a lot of articles, and also in Juriscons we have an activity that deals with that. Uh, the personal code and the grupal code of Cosmoethics. I'm doing here as well my merchandising.
yeah, sure. Carry on, carry on.
Yeah. And but I think that's for real now. I'm talking seriously. I think that's why I study cosmoethics, since I recover all this idea of consensual paradigm and consensology, because I think that without cosmoethics, it will be very difficult for us to change our level of lucidity, of maturity, because cosmoethics has to do with self and corruption. Yeah. And I think that it was really self corruption that one of the principal aspect that stuck to us during lives and lives and lives, and makes us look do some kind of self mimesis, repeat ourselves, you know, because it's easier, because it's more comfortable, emotional comfortable, because it pleases others. There are a lot of reasons, yes. And so that's why when you talk about being cosmo in or act in a cosmoethical way, the personal code of cosmoethics, it's very important. I've been studying this for, I don't know, almost more than 20 years, and I see no other priority items. One of the priority items in our, existential program and our existential planning, mainly in this life, that could be our more important life after the intermissive course. Yes, because we have these fresh ideas of cosmoethics um, coming from the intermissive course, because we have this community, the cosmoethical and consensological community, international, yes, cosmoethical and consensological community, where you could talk about this topic as we are doing here, and we could put more into practice. We could receive like feedbacks about our conduct in a friendly, yes, in the most time friendly way, yeah. And we have this kind of holoful scene in the international cosmetical consensological community, that's more suitable for us to really make some kind of deep and substantial change in our way of thinking, in our society. That's why, and that's, I think that's one of the most important things, to have a personal code of Cosmoethics, for us to organize our ideas, for us to have like a kind of way to check what kind of progress that we did, yeah, what we have done, and to be more accurate in the priority of our self-uncorruption attitudes.
All right. So we are almost done, and Eduardo Doria is congratulating you for the expansion of conceptuality in foreign languages. And to finish off, can you say a few words about it, about the subject, or what you feel, what you want to say about these to everyone, and just a few words, and we finish with all, we are almost done in time.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you again, João, for this invitation. Thank Vanderlei to be here with us, and thank the Consecutivist team that are on the backstage in order to, promote this kind of life. And my last words is, if you do not have a personal code, a written personal code of Cosmoethics in action that is put in practice, do it now. Do not waste any other time. Do it now. Okay? So thank you again. Thank you for the participation of everybody, and see you the next time. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Cristina.
João, for your facilitation.
Thank you. And Vanderlei?
First of all, I need to apologize for my rusty English. It's
No,
a
no.
first live that I participate speaking English. For me, it was a challenge. And thank you, everybody, for the invitation. Thank you, João, for the invitation, and the audience for the questions and the participate. I congratulate John for the mediation, and Cristina for the excellent explanation. For me, it was an honor to be here and contribute even the simple way to the debate. Thank you so much.
We thank you both. That was very good, very clarifying, and you both did very well. Thank you a lot. And I'd like to thank our guests, and um, I hope you have enjoyed like I did. And we are always here in Consecutivos with a new live video every Thursday from 7:30 on Brazilian time zone, right? So see you next time. You guys are always welcome, and it's a wrap. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Bye.